Hello and welcome to another instalment of the Wallop Sessions with me, Austin Russell. That was Anything by Catfish and the Bottlemen and Other Side by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. We have an absolutely stacked show for you today. We have my review of the horror movie HOKUM, which I'm really excited to tell you about. I've got some really juicy opinions on that film right there. We're also going to be reviewing Mortal Kombat 2 along with this week's pet peeve, and also the start of my new segment, Beyond the Pill, which is where I interview people, this week's guests, or for several weeks, because our conversation was that juicy. I'm going to be spreading that over the next 3 shows, with Nat, about how to avoid the traps of the male manosphere. I had a really good chat with him today, and you're going to hear that at the end of today's show. I thought I would give you some unifying songs to kick off today's show with anything, because if we can get through this heat wave, we can get through anything. That's why I started today's show off with that. And this heat wave is not quite fair, just like that song references that we just seen in Other Side by Catfish and the Bottlemen. After a short musical break, we are going to be getting into this week's pet peeve, which is people that talk at the cinema. That is going to be a very passionate one, that one. I had a right trouble this week with that. But before we get into that, here's Luke Combs with Hurricane. That was Disarm by the Smashing Pumpkins. Before that, we had Ignorance by My Chemical Romance by Paramore. And then we had Be Somebody by Kings of Leon and Luke Combs' Hurricane before that. As you know, Thursday is the best time of the week for me to rant and vent to get ready for Friday. And this week, as I teased earlier, we are going to talk about people that won't shut up during the cinema. I love the cinema. I always have since I started particularly going to Odeon Limitless. It's a great deal. Go get it if you can. But I just love the relaxation and the total disconnect from the world. I love the fact you have to turn your phone off. I love the fact that you have to be quiet. It's just a complete and utter, it's an entertaining sensory bath. You know those things where you have to lay in a bowl of water until you're cured from all your trauma or whatever it is. I mean, it is relaxing if Spider-Man and Doc Ock aren't fighting on a train and causing heart attacks for the citizens of New York council tax bill, let me tell you. That's just absolutely insane. But I tell you what's also not very relaxing, right, is when somebody decides that it's okay to have a running commentary during the whole film. That is so infuriating. The rules are very simple. You keep quiet and turn your phone off. And this week, watching Mortal Kombat 2, I had a double whammy, ladies and gentlemen. A double whammy. I had somebody on their phone and talking throughout the film. Can you believe it? I had actually had a double whammy. You could literally see the person's phone reflecting on the screen. I could see her Facebook wall more than I could see somebody getting beaten in Mortal Kombat. And honestly, guys, I was about 10 minutes away from challenging somebody to Mortal Kombat on behalf of the other people in that room. I would have lost, but I think the point would have been valid just by trying. You know what I mean? Just the attempt would have sufficed to maybe shut them up. I actually missed a fair portion of, not a fair portion of the film. I had to go downstairs to get somebody to tell them to pipe down and shut up. It was very, very annoying. So please bear that in mind when I review Mortal Kombat 2 later in the show, because that did kind of impact my review. I will give a more concise one maybe when it comes out on streaming and I can re-watch it and give it a second opinion. But you just know, right, if these people that talk in the cinema owned gremlins, you just knew that they were going to be kept in a swimming pool, won't you? You just know that they're going to keep them in the swimming pool and that's going to be where their bed is and they're just going to get them wet for the pants. That's the type of people that talk at a cinema, honestly. It is incredibly annoying to witness. and just infuriating because, as I said, the rules are just so simple. It's just I don't get it, and it's not the first time either. I had people just straight up. They must have not seen each other in years because they were rambling on during Death by Unicorn for about the whole film. But at least they weren't as loud. This guy that I was in the cinema with today was genuinely like screaming at his opinions of the film, and nobody else was responding, and it was so obvious. Like full volume, not even inside voice, and I was just like, "Oh my god, shut up! It's the bare minimum to be quiet, man. Like you're ruining my zen." It's just, oh my god, it's just so simple and basic to follow those rules. But yeah, as I said, just keep that in mind when I review Mortal Kombat 2 after this short musical break with Wanna Be Yours by the Arctic Monkeys. That was Times Like These by the Foo Fighters. Having a great time listening to that. I haven't heard that in a while. Well, now it is time for me to sit back after ranting at you guys today to actually review Mortal Kombat 2. Because I need to actually give you my constructive opinion on it and not just complain about my experience. Right, so the movie for me, I think I want to start off with the positives. It was a lot better and more enjoyable than the first film. Um, Even though obviously it still had its flaws and wasn't entirely great, they had quite clearly listened to the audience, his criticisms of the first movie. Like nobody particularly liked Cole Young because he wasn't an established Mortal Kombat character when the first film came out. So everyone was a bit like, why is this guy in here? We want to see like your Scorpions and your Sub Zeros and your things like that. And we didn't really get to see those guys in that film. I don't really know why they keep putting these Sub Zero and Scorpion in the film so little. It just seems so stupid to keep the most iconic characters so few in the film. I've never really understood it. It's a bit like making a Spider-Man film and not including him to the last 20 minutes. I've never really understood the logic that a lot of these studios take with that. And I think one of the problems that we do have with the Mortal Kombat franchise is it does feel like it's very restricted by the ability to the fact it's live action. I walked out of that second film wishing that the film was animated because I feel like that the creators would have a lot more free reign to do what they want if we got an animated film because the gore is limited and obviously the people that play these characters are very talented martial artists, that much is very clear. And I don't particularly know why they are so wooden though. That's one of my big problems is the tone of the film is very similar, like up to the point where all the characters feel the same, and it is very annoying because it does feel like all the line delivery for everyone is the exact same because they're so committed to this tone that every character kind of merges into one. And no way is this more obvious than I think than with the character Raiden. The character Raiden, it's abundantly clear that this is an issue. His performance is so wooden and so boring and just so straight to the point that it's almost just annoying to listen to. Like the Raiden character just doesn't feel like a leader to me when I watch these films at all, and it's just very annoying because he's got no charisma. If you play the game, all these characters have a little bit of charm and a little bit of charisma about them, and that's just not present in this film, as I said, because all the characters blend into each other because they're so committed to this serious tone. I think, as I said, it would benefit from being a bit more campier, so it's a bit more enjoyable for the audience to watch. This was a humongous improvement, though, from the first one, but it did also feel like they only used the first take for every scene, and I felt with a lot of the scenes there was a bit like is that the best take of that scene, really? And I was questioning it, because everything, as I said, is so committed to this tone that it's just wooden and a bit boring to watch. But the gore is obviously very good, and the violence is obviously there because it's a Mortal Kombat movie. But it's like I said, there would be so much more potential for the franchise if they just made an animated movie. And they have made animated films since, I believe, Mortal Kombat 11 came out. And those are quite decent films because obviously they're not restricted by the live action the restraints. And those films are actually quite good because they're also very character centric. A bit like how the MCU did it when it was first starting there, with the Captain America movie, and then we had a Hulk movie, which the MCU wants you to forget about, and then we had like loads of films individually, Iron Man, then we had a Spider-Man film, and then they all came together at the end. And I would love to see like a Scorpion-centric film in this franchise. I would love to see a Sub-Zero themed film, maybe even a Liu Kang themed film, just to give the audience a bit more to relate to deviate these characters from this ensemble cast. I did like the fact that this second film focused purely on the tournament, because the tournament is what the franchise is known for. So I was very happy to see them kind of rectify that mistake as well and making it fully tournament based, which I thought was very enjoyable. Shao Kahn is an imposing villain, but that's more down to the fight choreography more than the performance. Again, he's another character that's a victim of, this film is serious, so he must speak as wooden as possible. But yeah, I think the film is a humongous improvement. And I think if you liked the first one, you're going to come away very, very happy with it. And obviously, Kyle Urban does his best as Johnny Cage. I didn't really believe it as much as I would have liked to, because obviously he does such a good job as Billy Butcher in The Boys. So he is kind of a really good casting for Johnny Cage, and he does quite well with the material he's given. And the material he is given is kind of feels like a dated mixed martial artist, like failed actor would sound like. So at least that's character themed, his dialogue. There are a couple of weird scenes in the film where there's this awkward scene with Johnny Cage where one of his fans walks up to him and goes, "Oh mate, I used to love your films," and he just kind of like what's the word? Trying to use the correct word here because, well, I'm on air. He kind of just poo-poos all over it. There we go, we got an end. And it's a bit tedious, and you don't really want to root for him. And I think he was a great character to kind of introduce to this world at the time, because he's obviously from Earth, and everyone's obviously up with the lingo of the tournament, and he does a very good job of this as this fish out of water thing, to the point where, should they have used Johnny Cage first rather than using Cole Young, rather than establishing, Cole Young as a character and wasting people's time with a character they don't care about, they should have used Johnny Cage first. But obviously in the first film they were kind of teasing him so hard that they wanted to obviously save him for the second film, which I get because he's a very iconic character, but you've kind of also retreaded the same trope as the last film of having a fish out of water trying to understand the Mortal Kombat tournament and the Earth Realm versus the Netherrealm thing. So you've kind of repeated it. You've just done it with an established character this time and not just a new one you've made up out of thin air, which I thought was very, very a weird choice. I get why they did it, because he literally was a fish out of water. He's a kung fu actor in canon, so it made sense for that character to be a fish out of water. It's just, you've kind of made the same movie twice, which I don't necessarily hate, because the first film had a lot of flaws, and I think this film did reset the franchise pretty well. It just makes me wish that they did more character-based themed films. I'm hoping with the HBO Max element of Warner Brothers. They can fix that issue. Like, we can get some Scorpion content, we can get some Sub-Zero content, because that's what the films are desperately needing. There's not enough from the iconic characters. All the characters feel the same because of the tone, and they've made the same film twice. But I'm really hoping that they don't do it in the third one, because I think there is a third one on the way. They have announced the third one. But I'm still optimistic for the third one because of the amount of improvements they made for this film. And I think they made a huge step in the right direction. And I think with a franchise like this that's competing with, your Marvels and your Dunes and stuff like that. I need to watch Dune. That's going to be one of the homeworks in the future, by the way. Just a heads up. But I think they're making a lot of steps in the right direction. And if they can make this third film great, they'll be in really good stead for the future. But in conclusion, it's not a flawless victory by any means, but it was a humongous step in the right direction. And go find it and go see it if you can. Try and do it in silence so you don't have an experience like me. Right, so we're going to have a bit of a musical break now with Tightrope by the Stone Roses. That was Olivia Dean with The Man I Need, Tightrope by the Stone Roses. Before that, now it is time to talk about HOKUM. HOKUM was one of the movies that I watched so I can keep tabs on every movie to do this show every single week. It's not a movie I would have gone off my own accord, but it did surprise me in some elements. I think HOKUM was a lot of missed potential. It's this film about a guy that goes to his dead late parents' dream spot in order to find himself a bit for his next book, played by Adam Scott. And I think Adam Scott does an incredible job as this disgruntled kind of don't meet your hero sort of person. And he does a great job at establishing how that character works. There's a great scene with a bellboy where he tries to get him to read his manuscript and he says no, and he just straight up just burns his hand or something like that. And it's just it's such a great scene in kind of showing but not telling the state of what this guy is in, and I think it's a really, really good job. Where I think this movie falls, it is primarily because I think it had a really good murder mystery going on, and the murder mystery was doing a really good job of making sure that he comes to terms with the death of his parents, and it does a really good job of using visual horror to kind of make him come to terms with it, and it does a really good job of showing the audience that he's going through it and dealing with it, and not telling the audience that he's going through and dealing with it. Where I think the movie falls into basic horror tropes is that we have this problem with a lot of horror films where I feel like the premise is not enough, and they throw in some random horror monster just to kind of put on the poster that doesn't add anything to the narrative and doesn't add anything to the character's development. This is what Exit 8 avoided that I talked about last week, and I said that last week, that all the horror fits the theme of the film. And there's these witches that just come out of nowhere at the end of the film that don't really add anything to the plot of all the jump scares. It doesn't add anything to the character's development. It doesn't add anything to the narrative. But I did enjoy certain aspects of the movie. I thought the characters were great. The performances were all great. The woman who plays the bartender who's murdered plays a very good role, and she establishes the witches. So the witches are basically just a Chekhov's gun thing. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a movie terminology for if something is shown in the film, it must be used. And that's basically all the witches do in the film. They don't help the development and they don't help the structure of the story. But it did have one of the worst endings I've ever seen, and I'm going to have to spoil it to explain why this is terrible. Basically, how it ends up happening is he got his drink spiked by the person he spited earlier in the film. And it just turns out to all be a hallucination or all be a dream. And that's bad enough. And I can forgive the movie for that. I'm yeah, it's lazy, but I've seen worse, that's fine. Where I think the movie severely falls flat is that he asks to read the manuscript again after the main characters found out this information, and he agrees to read the manuscript. I'm like, you've just spiked this man and put him through a night of hell. Yes, he's like come to terms with his like parents' death because of the hell he went through, but still, there's no way I would let anyone do anything nice for me after that. I just, I just thought that ending was just unforgivably stupid. And the witches as well was kind of unforgivably stupid as well, as I said. I think it is a really good watch, and if you're a horror fan, you will get some enjoyment out of it. I just thought it was your typical, we need a business expense, cheap movie. Let's just make a horror movie that's going to make about 10 times its budget on £1 million. So it's like, it just it has a lot of the lazy horror pitfalls that I just don't like, but it is a solid film and I think you will really enjoy it. After this, I will be reviewing the homework for this week, The Devil Wears Prada. Here's Away from the Sun by Three Doors Down. Now it is time for my review of The Devil Wears Prada. I completely got what this film was going to be about completely wrong. I was expecting this deadly serious film that was going to do a really good like critique on the psyche of fashion and things like that. I was kind of expecting something similar to The Black Swan. That's what I was expecting. But I was kind of delightfully surprised by what I saw, because obviously Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, these are all like well-renowned serious actors, and especially Meryl Streep. And Anne Hathaway's had some really good serious roles like Les Miserables, and Emily Blunt's just had a not long removed from Oppenheimer, and she's got another Steven Spielberg movie coming up that I'm really excited about. I was really pleasantly surprised by the movie. The movie's definitely aged. The fact that a magazine is so important just shows how much the movie has aged. But I really thought it was a shining example of the actors understanding the assignment of the film and really getting it. And I really, really enjoyed watching it because all the actors knew what their role was particularly well. And you don't always get that in a lot of films, especially nowadays when they just kind of hire like big names just to sell tickets. All the actors understood the assignment, and the narrative is a bit cliche than I would have liked. You know, big girl in a big, small girl in a big city. I was kind of expecting something a bit more unique than that premise. But I did really enjoy my time watching it because I feel like if Devil Wears Prada, I guess I'll find out next week when I go see it in cinema. Devil Wears Prada was made today. I feel like it would be an overly serious Oscar bait if it was made today. And it was nice to see like a serious thing given a bit of that comedic twang, which you wouldn't really get if the film was made today, in my opinion. Because I think we're not as good at balancing tones these days in film as we used to be. That's my big film opinion, is nobody is particularly good at balancing comedy and drama, particularly anymore in film, and that was a shining example of how to do it. The film looks gorgeous. The colour grading is incredible for what it is. Again, if this film was made today, the colour grading would be overly realistic and bland. I guess I'll find that out next week again when I go see it. But I'm really, really looking forward to The Devil Wears Prada 2 because, as I said, that cast know exactly what they're doing. And you could just tell from the minute they're on screen. And I can assure you, if the script isn't particularly great for The Devil Wears Prada 2, that cast is going to make the best out of a bad situation. And I have all the faith in the world it's going to be at least decent. And not a now you see me, now you don't. My God, that was poor. But yeah, the performances were great. The story was a bit generic. I was kind of expecting like an American Psycho, like Black Swan kind of thing. But I thought the story was a bit bland and a bit predictable. But other than that, like the movie's really good and the performances do stand the test of time. The script stands the test of time, and it's a really enjoyable watch. And if you haven't seen it in a while and want to see it, I strongly recommend you do. The color grading pops, the performances are literally about as on point as it gets, and it's just a great watch, and you'll have a fantastic time watching it. Now is a very special segment for me. As I told you before, the last 2 weeks I've spent talking about the Manosphere with the Louis Theroux documentary. I've got my first guest on, and we're going to talk about it today with a guy named Nat Shelley, who's very stories, very special, and I think he's a great person to speak about. And we had a really great conversation. And over the next 3 weeks, I'll be splitting it up and showing it you in 6 segments. If you want to see the full thing, the whole thing is on my YouTube channel, Power Planet, this Saturday. If you want to watch the whole thing now, but if rightly so, you want some banging tunes in the middle over the next 3 weeks, you can tune in right here at NK Radio. But here is my discussion with Welsh artist Nat Shelley about the Manosphere. Is it really good
Yeah, no
behaviour
problem.
for us to start with?
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether you can tell by my accent, but I'm born and raised in Wales, in Cardiff, and I basically grew up with an alcoholic mother, and it very much formed how I turned into a grown up. It affected me quite deeply, um, and it kind of my mum and my stepdad split up when I was about 14, and that's when it kind of all everything went a bit topsy turvy for me for my private life, sorry, my family life, and I became my mum's drinking partner when I was 14 years old. So she would get me off to school. I flunked school and basically became blackout drunk every day with my mum's drinking partner. And the issue there was that the person that was supposed to be guiding you ended up becoming the person who was basically, I said basically three times now, but she was kind of like the person that was making me go off the rails. So that's how I kind of got into alcohol. And from there, I became homeless when I was 16, 15 actually. And I couldn't get any access to any benefits or any help or anything. So I became homeless and lived in a bush for a little while and managed to get a bed sit. But by then, the alcohol had completely ravaged me. I had liver damage by the time I was 18, 19 years old. And I'm not bragging about it. It sounds like I might be a bit flippant about it, but it wasn't a good time. And it I hit rock bottom very early. And I think I was very close to death at one point when I was about 19, 20. I was living in a derelict house with no heating or water or anything. And it was by watching a program. I think we've spoken about this before. I was I saw a program. It was kind of like a Jeremy Kyle program. It was a lady called Trisha, a program called Trisha, and I just caught this segment of it where she was berating a man on the stage. He was he was complaining, saying, "You don't understand what I've been through, Trish." And she turned around. This is the only bit I've ever caught of the show, but it must have, I must have, I was supposed to see it. It almost felt like so. I tuned into it, and she just said, "How old are you?" And he said something like 30, and she said, "How long are you going to keep on blaming your upbringing on your actions as an adult?" And it just got right in my head. I couldn't let that go, and I felt okay. I was very young. I was only say 19, 20 at the time, but it really resonated with me. Do you know what I mean? I'd never had anyone kind of say to me, take some responsibility for crying out loud, and it was just like a light bulb went off in my head. To be honest with you, Austin. And it was from there that so by the, I was it took me a while. I got myself off alcohol and drugs and everything myself. It took me probably about 18 months, but as you know, with drinking, it's best to reduce it bit by bit, isn't it? Instead of just going cold turkey. So that's kind of what I did. I was at that point. I think I was drinking about 20 cans of strong lager a day and cider, and I just reduced it down by 3 or 4 each week. I didn't rush, and I just get lower and lower. And then by the time I was 23, I kind of went back into the world. I was like reborn. So from a pretty bad childhood and the neglect and the abuse that I suffered with my mum and then the subsequent getting me into alcohol abuse, because I didn't say my mum actually gave me drugs when I was 14 as well. She got me into drugs, class A drugs. So I had a lot to deal with, and then I was 22, 23, and I just became the person I should have been. I think I became clean by that point, um, and that's where I started my life. Really, that's how I see, looking back at it. That's where I started my life. But as you know, with alcohol, you can lose a lot of your friends along the way through stupid behaviour. I wasn't a nice alcoholic, Austin. This is what I'm trying to say. I,
Yeah.
when I was 14, when my parents split up, I was one of the most popular kids in the school. In the year, nice guy. I used to, fight for the underdog and look after people who were being bullied. I was a good kid, and you wouldn't believe, I was arrested. I was fighting. The whole town kind of turned their back on me, and I was very much a blackout drunk. Were you a blackout drunk as well,
Uh,
where you just
I
genuinely don't remember a single thing?
I was too much of a lightweight to get blackout for me. So my my tolerance, because I think the point was with me is, I think one of the benefits to being a lightweight and not being a particularly pleasant drunk is cold turkey was very much a possibility for me,
Yeah.
because I wasn't needing a lot to essentially get to the state where people didn't like it. So
Mm.
I'm very fortunate in the sense of that alcohol didn't really agree with me in that sense, because it allowed me to just go, I've had enough of this. And one of the things I've learned through working with a lot of you guys at ACUK is what is essentially how lucky I was to have the alcohol experience I've had. Because obviously I've spoken with people that have obviously relapsed or actually had a lot of like issues stopping drinking, and I find myself very fortunate to be in a case where where even cold turkey was responsible, because obviously for me it was just a bit more of, I would see, I was well behaved. You see, I waited till I was boring. I waited till I was 18. I claim that. So so I didn't know what was coming. So when I got to university and I went throwing into all these house parties,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. So, and then obviously the tolerance and stuff went, my alcohol tolerance just never increased. For me, I went on a pub golf literally the night before I stopped drinking.
Mm.
And rightly so, my mates assumed I was going to come last because my tolerance was very low. So I was drinking in like preparation for it
Oh, no.
to try and win because I'm competitive, and and I still did it. I still ended up losing the pub golf at the point where I would have done if I didn't do all the drinking beforehand anyway. So I was literally getting dressed to go out again because I'd vomited. So I
Yeah,
changed
yeah.
my clothes, and I think I just decided when I went back out that I'm not drinking anymore. And
That's a
it was,
strong. It's a strong mind to do that straight away as soon as you realise there's an issue.
yeah,
Good on you, man.
because I think for me the main issue was trying to not drink in the university lifestyle.
Yeah.
That was the challenge for me, because it becomes glaringly obvious. Uh, I saved a lot of money. I remember what I did about 2 months into sobriety. I ended up buying Final Fantasy 16 or PlayStation 5 because I realized it was the same price as a bottle of Malibu. So I thought, hang
was
on a
that
minute.
was that your tipple? Was it Malibu?
No, it was my typical. Yeah, I liked to rum and coke. I did. That's what I liked, and pina coladas is what I liked. But it's
Spirits,
it
as they
seems
say.
to me like um that when you're, it's like you say, when you're, because I well, I didn't have a similar like experience to you, but I, in the sense of, when people are supposed to be guiding you in the right direction, I kind of had this thing where I was trying to I was using my friends to do that too much because of my drinking. So I would put a lot of pressure on the people like around me, like you would say. So people were not doing the things they were supposed to be doing because I think it's kind of like, and I think that's why the manosphere thing is so well. The issue is so important to me because that was right. See, it was rife when, and the Tate stuff was rife when I was at my most lost in my entire, like literally my entire life, because the decision I was battling with the decision to drink anymore and whether this was all for me when all this Tate stuff was kicking off. I remember when I was at the Why Not festival the year before I stopped drinking, you would hear young lads like saying things like "What colours your Bugatti" and things, and that was all kicking off.
Mm.
And I remember thinking that at the time I've got to be careful here because this is a possible it's a possibility I might go down here because
Yeah. So you looking for some kind of guidance, almost was drawn to it, was it?
well it wasn't well I think I just lost contact with, and I've spoken about this in my documentaries before. I just lost contact with like my most important friend at the time, and I
Yeah.
didn't know my mates at uni well enough for them to really fill in. So I was
Looking
feeling
around.
a bit like lost and isolated at the time, and I remember thinking to myself, like it wasn't like I wasn't like going, oh, this is a possibility. I was actually concerned that this could be where I was like heading. I'm very fortunate in my life that I've had a lot of close female friendships in my life, so it's not
Yeah.
particularly been an issue to like I don't know, misogyny
It
never
did-
been
yeah.
particularly been an issue.
To start demonizing women as they tend to do, isn't it? Yeah.
Um,
It's yeah. I get that. It was similar. Yeah, I lost my mum about 10 years ago, and I was searching for answers as to why my mum was the way she was. She had a personality disorder, and again, through looking for answers, not so much, not through sort of not having a support network or anything. It there's not much written about female psychopathy, so that's what got me down, because you go on Google and you type in female psychopathy. A lot of the threads, a lot of the posts tend to be within the manosphere. It's not a talked about subject because, as you're probably aware, not many women are in prison compared to men. So men do tend to get looked at more for things like psychopathy and if, the sociopathy and stuff like that. So looking at why my mum was the way she was, that's what got me looking at the manosphere about 10 years ago. But I was very much the same as you. I recognized it for what it was, and I didn't get sucked into it. But it was very interesting looking, to be able to stay out of it, but then study it in a way to see what's going on underneath, isn't it? There is a lot going on. Like you said, you having female friends or family, I think, is a major part of it as well. Uh, I've always got on with women. I've always had female friends, um, so I was never going to get sucked into the misogyny of it all. And you're probably the same as you in that respect, yeah.
well, I think for me, because obviously as a disabled kid growing up, like the boys were very active and they played football every week and stuff like that, whereas like the girls would kind of just sit and talk, which was
Yeah,
more suited to my physical deficiencies.
right.
Obviously, I still try to play football and things, but I think growing up with kind of socializing with women being kind of my best option because of they're more talkative, sit down and be sociable people than boys are when they're like running around
Definitely.
doing stuff and being boisterous. I think that's kind of what kind of I think because I never even had the what how do you even say the 6 year old like girls with growth phase. I never even had that.
Yeah.
Uh, so because at the time, like as I said, the girls were like my best way to socialize when I was growing up because of my nature and my condition. So
Well,
it was never
it does make sense,
it
yeah.
was never an issue because obviously um but going back to the manosphere, where do you think it's kind of winning at the moment, and how can we stop it from winning at the moment? Because I think even though the Into the Manosphere documentary exposed it for what it was, I do think it showed some clear signs that it was still very much winning um in some areas. Where do you think it's winning, and
I
where
think
do you think the battle can be?
it's a difficult one because there are there are many men. I can only talk from a Western point of view. In the UK, I see it with a lot of my friends. There are a lot of disaffected men. There's a lot of men who haven't settled down and had kids, haven't been able to find a partner and settle down and have kids. And I think we probably need to address how men see themselves within society. Uh, I think the past 20 years, 30 years has become a lot more of a female centric media and television. And rightly or wrongly, I'm not casting judgment on that at all. Um, I think the best singers are female, to be honest. And I'm in the art world. Most artists are female. I think they excel at many things that men don't. But I don't think there's anyone really. Well, there probably are a few, but there's not many role models for wholesome role models for men. Um, there's not that. I wouldn't call him wholesome as such, but David Beckham. There's not that universally inspirational male role model. I don't think anymore. And I think with the internet and showing off, and you got Instagram showing off what you got. Instagram life isn't real, and I don't think many people realize that. And I think people are just aspiring to outdo each other financially to show off. And I don't think there's much purpose anymore for for men. I don't want to sound mean towards men, but I think a lot of men are struggling to know what they're doing in life. And when you start drifting like that, I think the male psyche sometimes becomes so insular and bitter. And this is where the manosphere comes in. They're online. They've got no support a lot of the time. They're failing with women, and I think they're just ripe to buy into the kind of the manosphere ideologies of what's the word? What do they call it? Like the marketplace, don't they? And they start marking women out of 100, and then it becomes very bitter, and they start being nasty towards women, and that needs to change. And I think we need more male role models. So it's a big task. I know lots of men who are just distraught. They don't know what they're doing in life. And this is men in their 30s and 40s. You probably know some that are younger. You're younger than me, but I don't know what the
Oh,
answer is, but it is a bit of a. We have to do something as a society, don't we? I think.
I I totally agree with you about the male role models, because I think as much as I don't necessarily agree with the whole concept of like interests, like saving your life and things. I think it's what you do with that interest and what you do with that passion that makes you save your own life. Personally, but I think that's where my like American football particularly came into play. Yeah, watching these where because a lot of the time when I was at university as well, a lot of the people that played for my team were my age. They were all young 20 something lads
Yeah.
that were working hard every week and playing their butts off. And I think even though I wouldn't class Washington as a lifesaver, I do think it was the main reason why I didn't go down the manosphere route, because
Because
I
you,
had
you
these
you had something, yeah.
I had these young men who were well, not just like me, because I'm not as an athletic freak like a lot of them are, uh but they were my age, and they were all working hard to like win and achieve things. And I think that was a real big reason as to why I didn't because I found those male role models
Exactly.
during that time in my life, and I think you can also. I think it's very often. I don't think it's talked about a lot either. How much of a role model the people around you can turn into.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
it, if they're positive role models, that is especially like I can think of like two friends from uni that I try and be more like every time I'm around them because they're nice, competent people and I enjoy their company. And I think certain times with men especially, I think the role model isn't big enough if it's just that mate you go for a pint with or
Yeah.
whatever. It it needs to be this high achieving end goal like role model to almost count. And I think we need to be teaching these men we can find role models anywhere, as long as
Yeah,
they
sure.
as long as they behave like, as long as they're like respectful and work hard and all that sort of stuff, and don't you know try and tell you a course. I don't see why that people
Yes,
can't be.
yes, they give the advice and then hold back just before you get the answer, I think, and you've got to sign up to their course. Of course you have, haven't you? So,
Yeah, but it's it.
snake oil salesmen there, I think. A lot of them are just cowboys, aren't they? Grifting on young men's vulnerabilities, I think.
But
Precisely the type of men that those young men don't need around them.
Yeah, exactly. I think you need people to almost have. I feel like when you're a young man, you need like-minded experience more than you need like aspirational goals, because I think camaraderie means so much to the male psyche, probably a lot more than most people, because camaraderie, it's big regardless of gender, but I feel like there has always been this deep-seated psychology, I think, towards camaraderie.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Well, as a species, we're group orientated, aren't we? We're social. But the issue I've got there is or I've grown up with a lot of young men and older men now that they just haven't got those type of people around them. The people that their friends and stuff are in and out of prison. They're or they've got loads of kids by different partners. Just men haven't got these role models. I kind of grew up in quite a rough area, and there's no role models there. You just go down the pub, you get into trouble, um, and do drugs, and that's just across the country. As I think it'd be lovely to have role models, but the point I was trying to make from that is I think that men are kind of now starting to take on the responsibility themselves a bit more. I've noticed that in the past 3 years. I think I've definitely noticed a lot of men go, right, I got to do this myself, like taking responsibility. And I think it's very healthy to not put the onus on, say, your friends or role models. It's always good to have an almost like stoic, um, what can I change? If I can't change it, don't worry about it. Change what I can and do what's best for me. And I think that's the secret to men not drifting off into the manosphere. Is there's many different ways. Just responsibility. I think as a young man, you're not taught responsibility. You know, it's make a quick buck. Show off online, uh, and there's not much depth, or everything's quite shallow. And I think men, this is how I dealt with it anyway, and I've seen it with men a lot more recently. Is starting to take responsibility, and do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, yeah,
to build your own confidence instead of trying to lean on other people, and just like I know quite a few mathematicians, uh, traditionally a very geeky, nerdy kind of culture. There's a lot of people within academia now getting a lot of men getting fit on their own. There's a lot of muscly mathematicians and physicists now. They're not as geeky and nerdy, and I've noticed this I think I don't want to say the more intelligent, but I think if you can think for yourself as a man, you can better yourself. I think if you almost like rent out your thoughts to some Flash Harry on Instagram, you're going to become like them. But if you take the responsibility, I think that's how I looked at it. Basically, is take especially when I was coming out of alcoholism, is I took responsibility, and that's the main thing that I tell myself: take responsibility. And I think hopefully I'm seeing these little shoots in, like I said, within academia, for instance, of men starting to take responsibility.
That was She's Electric by Oasis. We have Mystify by In Excess before that. One insightful chat there. I just wanted to do a bit of a viewer discretion thing. If you are affected by any of the issues in this conversation over the next couple of weeks, you can go to talktofrank.com to find any problems with substances or anything like that, or contact the Samaritans at your wish. You are not alone in this fight, and we are all here to help you if you so wish. Right, so it's time for me to pick this week's homework, and I think it would fit really well with what we've spoken about today. And I've been resisting picking this homework over the last couple of weeks because it's my favourite film. It's too easy. Your homework this week is to watch the critically acclaimed A Real Pain. The movie follows two cousins on a road trip across Poland, and it's an absolutely beautiful movie. It's won multiple it's like script writing awards and stuff, and it's just an absolutely incredible movie. Kieran Culkin won Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars for it. Jesse Eisenberg won a BAFTA for Best Screenplay. It's got awards coming out the wazoo, and it's an absolutely powerful movie. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've chosen it for your homework this week is it's a great movie about male friendship, and I think that's what that conversation is about. And for what it means to me, this film is leaps and bounds above any other film I've ever seen. If you want to find out why it's my favorite film of all time, I do actually have a documentary about it, Adulthood: Healing Through a Real Pain, that you can watch right now on my YouTube channel, Kapow Planet. And as I said earlier in the show, if you want to watch the full conversation with Nat Shelley 2 weeks before you hear the rest of it on the radio, you can also go to Kapow Planet as well to listen to it. Here are two songs now before I give you the rundown for next week. And that was Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses and Boys That Sing by Viola Beach. What a show this has been. It's been one of my favourite ones I've done so far. Talking about some really good films and really hoping you've got some really good advice there. Honestly, if you'll become a better person if you finish watching A Real Pain this week. Alright, genuinely, that's how good I think this film is. But you will have a good time with that. What an insightful conversation with Nat there. I really enjoyed having that interview, and obviously other parts are coming in the next couple of weeks. What have we got coming up next week? We have the review for one of my most anticipated films of the year in Finding Emily, which is a British rom-com, I believe. And when I first saw this, I was like, finally, somebody's making like a cheap film again about two people just vibing, and it's not just another like tax avoidance like horror film that's just being pushed out. And I was absolutely buzzing to see that coming back to the screens, because we've not really seen that sort of film come out since probably like the mid 2000s, when it was like Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist or The 40-Year-Old Virgin and films like that. Like, I love those films like that, so I will make sure I support those films this week. We will also be talking about the horror movie Obsession, where somebody's simpy energy comes back to bite him. This was actually recommended to me by the Odeon staff, so I'm really hoping that's a very, 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 very good film. I've heard that was made for like dirt cheap, only like $200,000, so it's made like 82 million, so it's been a roaring success, and it's been absolutely really enjoyable again. We will finally be getting to Sheep Detectives as well. Didn't have time to fit it in this week because of the interview with Nat, but we should be able to finally get that in for you today. Obviously, and also I tried to watch it this week, but my chair exploded, so I couldn't go to the cinema to actually go see it. Anyway, it has been an absolute pleasure today making this show for you. I'm going to leave you with 2 songs, with Medicine by Laundry Day and Somebody Told Me by The Killers. I will see you next week with more on the Wallop Sessions.